And I'm looking at this and I'm like, these are the most ugliest machines I've ever seen. Like, just look at them. We got Teddy Grahams over here, Tweety Bird holding up a cupcake or some shit. We got this wolf with a missing eye. Oh my god. And then we got this bunny rabbit. I think it's a bunny rabbit. It could be another bear. What up, VSD here, coming at you live. And I just watched the movie Five Nights at Freddy's. And I've got to admit, this movie was very interesting, so I decided to do a critique on this movie after I saw it. Now, you know how I go through my fundamentals, technicals, acting, physical story, and emotional story analysis of how I go into the plot of the story in order to come up with a possible theme and give my thumbs up, thumbs down, 5-star rating on it. I will also go over as to whether there is any historical, political, or religious significance to the story, or anything that supported its creation, if there is any. For me personally, I first got introduced to the whole Five Nights at Freddy's franchise years ago from a YouTube gamer called Dashy Games. And if you're not familiar with him, definitely check out his YouTube content. He's been doing this for at least 8 years, because that was my first time experiencing Five Nights at Freddy's from him. But now, time for some history. Five Nights at Freddy's was originally a survival horror game that was developed in 2014 by a man by the name of Scott Coffin. Scott started out by self-funding his own Christian adventure video games, which most people may not even know. However, his debut to fame was the Five Nights at Freddy's video game series that he first submitted to Steam in 2014. Since then, the video game franchise has become so popular. There were so many different sequels that came out, different types of paraphernalia, and a lot of gamers started playing a lot of different versions of this game, and it just grew into a very big success. The man has even written novels based off of the Freddy series, and I think that's pretty cool. In his career, Scott has made over 50 plus different games. He's also been able to create at least 10 different types of animated short films, where a lot of his films have a really deep focus on Christianity. Aside from his many accolades, in the Freddy's movie, Scott is one of the screenwriters and also one of the producers of the film alongside Jason Blum. Now, the objective of the video game is very simple. You are a night employee working at a pizzeria. What a pizzeria is doing working that late in the night, I have no clue. But you're basically there just to survive 5 nights of employment. Yeah, but really, the only thing that's stopping you are these animatronics that are trying to kill you. So you're not the first person to work there all 5 nights. So this movie is going to follow the same pattern of the plot from the games into the movie, except with some interesting additives and twists. Okay, so you guys should already be accustomed to my first scene rule, but if not, I'm going to go ahead and just reiterate it for those that didn't see my other content. Normally, the first scene of a movie is not needed at all. It's like an added scene, or it's like a bonus trailer for a movie that we're about to watch. In most cases, we never come across the character in the first scene ever again, except for a very minor role. So the first scene for this film, we basically see this security guard working at Freddy's at night. He ends up getting captured, sat in a chair, and he's being forced into an animatronic suit, and he obviously dies. So that first scene isn't really needed. It would have been better to have the intro animations that we saw later, but that first scene is really not needed at all. Just my preference, but not needed at all. It wouldn't surprise me if Jigsaw actually played Five Nights at Freddy's because of the way this trap was set up. So when this movie starts, we're first introduced to this guy named Mike. And later on, we start to see that he's a security guard, and for some reason or another, he sees this guy walk off with this kid in the mall, and he just rushes him and tackles him into the fountain, and then starts beating the shit out of him. I've never seen brutality like that before in my life. And the kid's crying. The reason why is because that's his daddy. So that's how we are introduced to this character. Mike is a psychopath, apparently. After Mike's scuffle with the dad at the mall, he is sitting in front of his career counselor. And for some reason or another, The career counselor promotes for Mike to work at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. And I'm like, why would you want to promote that job that you know people keep turning up missing at to Mike? And it makes me very suspicious. Just saying. As the plot moves along, I start to begin to understand more of the relationships between these characters on the screen. It wasn't as strong in the beginning because I'm wondering, like, how is this person related to this person? And in this case, I'm talking about Mike and Abby. I'm thinking, like, why do you, sir, have custody over this child? What is your relationship? Is this your daughter? I'm still trying to figure this shit out. We find out later that Abby is actually Mike's younger sister. However, this makes me wonder, what is the age gap between the sister and Mike? Like, when you think about it, the age gap may not make sense. Because I'm wondering, when is this child born? Because you see, folks, we see a flashback in the past of Mike and his family at a picnic. I did not see the girl. And Mike at this time probably was like 8 or 9 years of age. And what ended up happening was his younger brother ended up getting kidnapped and he never saw him again. Sad. Yes, I know it's very sad, and it's very sad that this happens in the world. But I'm wondering, when on earth did the parents give birth to Abby? Because I need to know their age gap. That's the one thing I'm trying to figure out. Because we later learn in the story that Mike's mom dies, as then later on, because of the grief from the mom dying, the dad dies too. And so I'm wondering, like, if they're that grief-stricken over the loss of their youngest son, would they want to create another child under these emotional circumstances? And if so, what is the age gap? Because it's not making any sense. Like, the clicks aren't clicking. Because if you really think about it, let's assume that Abby was at the picnic, Abby would have to be younger than the youngest son. So if I'm taking into consideration Abby's age gap from her brother, the oldest sibling in the family, I'm not convinced that the parents would even want to have sex to have another child. So this isn't making any sense to me, especially when you look at the suicidal tendencies of the mom and dad, Abby and Mike's parents. I don't even think Abby should even exist. I think Abby honestly only exists because of the plot of the story. That's what I'm getting from it. But then it also begs the question, how did Mike get custody of Abby? Mike, as we see, is struggling from job to job to job to job to job, and it looks like he has a 2-bedroom apartment. One for Abby, one for himself. So I'm thinking, like, if you can't take care of yourself, what court in the world is going to let you take care of your child? But more on that later. So like I said before with flashbacks in my video Flashbacks 101, when I was going over the movie The Nun 2, a flashback only works if it's going to motivate the character who's having the flashback in the present time to take action. So the whole flashback that we see where he last saw his younger brother that got taken away by a kidnapper, the first time we see the flashback, that should be the moment that we see first before Mike tackles the dad into the fountain. That would have made so much sense to have it positioned there in the cut instead of later on in the cut. So there's this scene where we see Mike sitting next to his aunt, next to her attorney across from another dude. Basically, the aunt is fighting for custody of Abby. And I'm looking at this scene and I'm like, why on earth would this woman want to hire this attorney who looks so scared out of his mind that he does not know what he is doing? I wouldn't even trust that he can even get the job done. I'm just saying. This is almost like a very classic motif where you have one side of the family trying to fight over the children, and then all this plot and bullshit happens and yada yada yada. For some reason, the movie Parent Trap, starring Lindsay Lohan, comes to mind. I don't even know if the plot was even similar to that, but that's the thing that's on my mind right now that this reminds me of. Although it involves twins switching places, you have to watch the movie in order to understand what I'm talking about. So the career counselor was able to get Mike a job, but the entire time I'm wondering, so many different questions as to how this job even exists. Because the building looks like a wreck. It looks like it's bankrupt. It looks like it's foreclosed and shit like that. So I'm thinking, like, why on earth would you want to work at an abandoned building? Who's the owner? It's been closed since the 80s and the 90s. Yes, I understand that. But there's no revenue. There should be no power. So the owner is willing to pay utilities, property taxes, and likely a triple net lease for commercial property that has no sales. And yet no one's suspicious? No one. I mean, no one is suspicious of this. This honestly should be either a foreclosure or a bankrupt building with no revenue whatsoever. You can even argue that the building has asbestos, which is why no one bothered to even take a look inside and buy it. But I can't fathom why the owner would want to keep this building on, knowing that he still has to pay utilities, taxes, and maybe even a friggin' lease. So Mike is sitting in the security room and he notices a tape with his name on it. And so I'm sitting back in my chair in the theater and I'm thinking, career counselor plus tape with Mike's name on it equals setup. I think this is a setup. So Mike, in all his genius and all his sense of responsibility, he's been hiring a babysitter to look after Abby while he goes to work at Freddy's, as well as his other past jobs where he got fired. And then later on in the movie, we see a scene where this babysitter is sitting next to her boyfriend across from Mike's aunt and next to Mike's aunt's attorney, the one that scared shitless out of his pants all the time. And then I see, aha, this kind of does remind me of the movie Parent Trap, but I digress. So basically, Mike's aunt is colluding with the babysitter and her boyfriend on trying to find proof that to use in court to try and get custody of Abby. They are even talking about potentially murdering Mike in order to get Abby. And the attorney says, like, I don't know if I should be listening to this. And he begins to get up, but Mike's aunt sits his ass back down that chair in that restaurant. I'm like, this is the most weirdest scene ever. But the stupid attorney hearing this alongside the aunt, the babysitter, and the babysitter's boyfriend, I'm like, I honestly don't think he's an attorney. I really don't. I don't think he's an attorney. I think he has power of attorney. I don't think he's an attorney. So the restaurant is called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. I'm thinking, who wants to go eat at a place called Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria? Just think about it for a second. Would you rather go, as a kid, would you rather go to Freddy's Fazbear's Pizza or would you rather go to Chuck E. Cheese's? Think about that. Think of the name value. Chuck E. Cheese's. Chuck E. Smith's Pizza. Chuck E. Cheese's. I feel like the name could have had more work done. Dreams and premonitions. This movie is full of Mike having dreams and premonitions. Mike has dreams going, he actually puts himself back in that, I'm trying to find my words. This man can make himself have a dream. The same dream of an event that he saw himself experience from way back when, from when his little brother got taken. And he's going to the same event in the dream world over and over and over again. And eventually he sees these kids, which apparently are the ghost kids of these little animatronic shits. And I'm thinking that this entire movie is just full of flashbacks. And then the flashbacks gradually turn into an intervention. At least it moves the plot, but that's the job of the flashback, not the dream sequence. So I don't even recall whether if this was night 1 or night 2. Let's just say this was night 1. So during night 1, well, Mike is working at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. He sees on the security camera a cute blonde cop outside the front door. And I'm like, oh, we got company. But basically the police officer, her name is Vanessa. I remember that. I'll stop. And so Vanessa comes in, checks on the place and yada yada yada, and she's having a conversation with Mike about the restaurant, the place, and yada yada yada. And I'm immediately suspicious because normally when you are a police officer doing rounds, you have a partner. and that partner is supposed to have your back. So normally police officers works in groups of twos. So the fact that Vanessa showed up to Freddy's without a partner and she just was a plethora of knowledge about the place, it became too obvious and too suspicious for me. And I started to watch her closely. Not because of those golden locks, but because I feel like something's up. And I'm gonna find out what it is. Call it my man intuition's tingling. So eventually, as the movie progresses, we start to get a look at what the animatronics look like in the movie. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, these are the most ugliest machines I've ever seen. Like, just look at them. We got Teddy Grahams over here, Tweety Bird holding up a cupcake or some shit. We got this wolf with a missing eye. Oh my God. And then we got this bunny rabbit. I think it's a bunny rabbit. It could be another bear. I don't know. But we basically got these animatronics, and I'm thinking, what kid wants to go to a pizza place and look at that? Just think about it. Would you rather look at that or look at something like Sylvester and Tweety at Six Flags or Chucky? Not Chucky from Child's Play, Chucky from Chuck E. Cheese. Just think about it. The machines are ugly. And it's not because they're old, it's because they're ugly. Now, one of the most interesting things about this movie, which works for me, are the kill scenes. That may be shocking for y'all, but let me explain. The kill scenes in this movie are so cool. So we got Chikorita over here with that stinking cupcake. And what ends up happening is after, I think, night 1, night 2 of Mike's working at the place, what happens is that the people that Mike's aunt hired to make Mike look bad break into the pizza place to steal shit and to break shit. The animatronics watch all of this happen and they get pissed. So the first kill was with Chikorita with the cupcake, and this one guy, like literally, like the cupcake literally ate the dude alive. Then one of the guys sees this and he's like running through the halls, while the other guy seeing him run through the halls from the security room that Mike works at. And while the guy is like locking himself in the closet to hide from a cupcake, we see this bonbon bunny bitch standing there behind him. And then it just cuts to a scene outside the closet and they're screaming and yada yada yada, blood and a hand. It kind of reminded me of Titanic. I'll stop. And then the guy who's at the security camera who's watching all of this take place goes to investigate, gets spooked out, and he's trying to go out the back door, but the back door won't open. And then you see this wolf shit just charge at the guy, and then you just hear nothing but screams. Now here's the crazy part. The babysitter girl goes inside to find out what's taking everybody so long, and she ends up finding Freddy in a room. I think it's Freddy. She's like looking inside of Freddy's mouth because there's some weird sounds going on. And then a hand comes from the mouth and grabs the girl, pulls her into the machine, and Freddy bites the bitch in half. Like you literally see half of the body in a shadow silhouette fall. The only thing that made it unbelievable was the fact that there was no blood, like splurting and shit like that, because when you get cut in half, there's blood spurting. But because it is rated PG-13, I can understand why they kept it that way. But the kill scenes in this movie were very good and well executed. So the next day, Mike comes in with Vanessa and sees all this bullshit take place from the other night where the whole place is trashed. And I'm thinking, Mike, you're security. Why do you have to clean? Shouldn't the owner have a cleaning crew that comes in periodically, since he wants to keep this place like spit and span and shit like that? The owner should have a cleaning crew. The security guard should not be cleaning anything. I mean, think about it. The owner is not making sales but has enough money to keep the lights on. So that should tell you something. Mike is night shift, so he works throughout the entire night to be security. So why isn't there a cleaning service to come in during the day? It only makes sense, but hey. So eventually, Mike learns from Abby and Vanessa that these animatronics, Chikorita, the wolf, the Teddy Graham, and the purple bunny, that these animatronics are currently possessed by the ghosts of children. Like what happened is that like they're the bodies of these ghost children are embedded within the machines. So I guess that means that's what enables them to be possessed. So how Abby was able to find this out was like this. On the night that the babysitter didn't show up to babysit Abby, which is because, you know, she got killed, Mike ends up taking Abby to work with him. What happens is that she builds a tent and she ends up sleeping in the tent right behind Mike, while Mike dozes off and goes into one of his little dream sequences again. While Mike is sleeping, Abby leaves the tent to go play with the animatronics because she was being led by a ghost. The animatronics were actually playing back with her. Apparently they're friendly with her. Abby reveals that there are ghost children inside, and so as it turns out, Vanessa knows this as well. And so I'm like, if Vanessa, who is a police officer, knows that there are ghost children and the bodies of ghost children within these animatronics, then why has there not ever been a crime scene or a crime report about it? This tells me that Vanessa's up to something. I think she knows something about this restaurant. I think she knows something about these children. Either she grew up with the children, or she's somehow connected with how the children became ghosts. Like I said before, I'm watching you, bitch. I'm watching you very closely with both my eyes. When Abby is brought home after the whole introduction and playing around with the animatronics, Mike notices some of the drawings. And what he sees is that Abby drew a picture of her friends, and her friends look identical to the ghost children Mike has been seeing in his dreams. But also, Abby ended up drawing a picture of the scene where Mike last saw his younger brother being taken away in a car where he's seated in the back seat. And it's all done in crayon, so it's actually pretty well detailed. Anyway, I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, so Abby got superpowers. Abby actually reminds me of that girl from American Horror Story who's clairvoyant. So Abby must be clairvoyant, because there's no other way to explain this, because Abby never lived to see her older brother, who was the middle child, who was Mike's younger brother. As this movie progresses, I'm realizing that there really isn't a main conflict in the story. It's more of a main realization. The main realization is that these animatronics are possessed by ghost children and they can move by themselves, autonomous from any device or power source, yada yada yada. That's it. That's really it. There's really no main conflict, because the main conflict has to be a problem introduced to the story that disturbs every single member in the entire world of the story. So there really isn't a main conflict, there really is just a main realization that leads to other events taking place. There's this one scene where Vanessa threatens to shoot Mike if he brings Abby back to the restaurant. I'm thinking, what? You are a police officer and you're threatening to shoot someone? That doesn't even fly with me. This makes me believe that Vanessa is in on the tale in some type of way. One thing that annoys me about Vanessa is that this chick never answers direct questions. What time is it? I don't know. Why do you want to know the time? Now, that wasn't the question asked in the movie, but you get my point. Like, she's dodging questions, not answering direct questions, and it makes me even more suspicious of her. Like I said before, I'm watching you with both my eyes. I haven't blinked once, because this is showing me that she is keeping secrets and is willing to shoot someone to keep those secrets. I don't like that. Here's what happens. Freddy sneaks into Mike's apartment to get Abby to make her an animatronic like the rest of the game. Mike's aunt is babysitting, so you know what comes next, R.I.P. Now, Mike sneaks into the restaurant to save Abby, and after short-circuiting the animatronics, a surprise animatronic shows up, and it's the yellow rabbit from the crayon drawings on the fan art wall. When I first saw this, the first thing that came to mind was that this is a yellow peep. You know, from Easter candy? It's a marshmallow bunny, but it looks like the kind of peep you get if they served them for Halloween. Basically, after a few failed attempts by Mike to defeat this thing, the animatronic takes its head off, and we later learn that it's a helmet, and underneath it was Mike's career counselor. Listen, get your Scooby snacks, folks, because that's not all. Vanessa shows up to help Abby and Mike, and we learn that this is her father. Now, grab your Kool-Aid, because we learned that when Vanessa was a kid, She saw her dad, who ran the restaurant, kidnap kids and kill them in these animatronics. Why? Who the fuck cares? And one of the kids he abducted was Mike's younger brother. So how this guy was defeated was simple. Abby, rips the drawing of the yellow bunny who has the goat's kids holding hands in a circle with him, and she draws a new drawing of the yellow bunny killing the kids. This causes the animatronics to remember how they died, and they turned on the Peep bitch. So now the evil Peep has been vanquished. But there are so many questions that are left, like how do you explain the dead bodies of the people at the restaurant, as well as the aunt at the house? Because what happened was Freddy went to the house and the aunt was looking after Abby while Mike went to work. This was probably day 4 or day fucking 5, probably day 4. And what happens is that Freddy ends up taking Abby, and Abby sees the aunt lying on the floor, not knowing that she's dead. So I'm thinking, how are they going to explain the dead bodies? And they never do, and this is one major plot hole in the entire movie. There are dead bodies at the restaurant, there are dead bodies at Mike's apartment. How do you explain that? Now, if I take into consideration the fundamentals, the technicals, the acting, the physical story, as well as the emotional story of the entire movie itself, I honestly would have to give this 2 stars. Here's why. The movie fundamentally and technically was well shot and well executed. The acting in itself was believable. It wasn't like award-winning worthy, but it was decent enough. I was able to buy into what the story was and what they were trying to say. But at the end of the day, there are certain parts in the fundamentals, the technicals, and the acting though that wasn't really that believable and that didn't really draw me in. In terms of the physical story, there was really no main conflict. We had a main realization that the animatronics were alive, and then we had a low point when Freddy came to take Abby and to turn Abby into one of them, which is a undead ghostly animatronic or some shit, right? And so we have a physical story that's very weak, and we don't really have a strong emotional story, and there's a lot of different plot holes. So that's why I honestly would give it 2 stars. Now, this movie was rated PG-13, and I can see why. This movie really feels like a children's horror story. What I mean by that is that if you take the different genres, you have things that are made for children, you have horror, thriller, suspense. We have a little bit of these different things, except it's geared more so towards children and fans of the franchise, and I understand that. But in terms of execution, the story wasn't really that strong as a whole, so that's why I personally would give it 2 stars. This is something that I would definitely see again from either TV or streaming services, just to relax, because it was a fun movie. You can't take that away from it. It was a very fun movie, but I felt like the audience for this movie, it belonged to it for children. If the screenplay was adjusted a bit, you would have had this movie geared more towards a G or PG audience, because PG-13, I don't feel like it felt that it belonged. What I would have done differently if I were writing the screenplay for this movie is that I would have Mike try and become a private investigator in service to his community and neighboring communities due to the loss of his brother. Abby would not exist, his parents would be dead, and the only family he would have had is his aunt, and I would introduce an uncle as a fatherly figure for Mike. I would set this story near the holidays, so close to the time of Thanksgiving, which is why Mike has returned home under the roof of his aunt and uncle. Upon being home, Mike starts to look into disappearances of children, which he has always been doing since he became a PI in hopes of finding his brother's kidnapper, which seems like a pipe dream to him at the moment. Shockingly, he learns of disappearances of children around the area going back since the 80s, which he triangulates to being somehow related to this old restaurant called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which closed in the 80s as well, yet for some reason is still in operation. Upon learning this, Mike begins to stake out the restaurant, where he notices that the security guard who works there never came out after the 5th night at the end of his shift. This spurs Mike to apply for a new job opening as security and investigate firsthand to what is going on at this abandoned restaurant and why it is still in operation. Now, Will Mike make it to the 5th night? So I just watched Five Nights at Freddy's in theaters. And it was an okay movie. It's not the best, it's not life-changing or anything like that. It's a fun little movie. It has some nostalgia, and it's something that I wouldn't mind seeing again.